we should.
I didn't get that fan on, but actually it's cool down because it's meant to rain.
Let's see what we bring up on over here.
Are we live? Yes.
We're live.
I'm assuming we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second webinar of this PHIVE webinar series. Today, we're going to be discussing immersive storytelling, and we have some fabulous people here to discuss and chat about that, and storytelling in heritage and using the digital domain as a medium for its preservation, discussion, promotion, informal learning, and dissemination. So I'm Catherine Cassidy. I'm from Open Virtual Worlds, the University of St. Andrews. We also have Alan Miller from the University of St. Andrews on the call, and we will be, Alan, did you want to present to everybody? Sorry if I'm starting to present. Are you
No, it's fine. You keep going.
Sorry, when do I stop? So we have Kay Hall from the Barbados Museum and Historical Society today, along with Michelle Hingston Cox from the Barbados Community College, speaking together from their experience. And also Mary Morrison, she might be joining us in a little bit, from the North US Historical Society with her work up in the Outer Hebrides. So Alan, would you like to say something?
Thank you very much for that introduction, Catherine. And yes, today's meeting session is about immersive storytelling, and it's being hosted by PHIVE, which is a project funded by the Northern Periphery and Arctic program of the European Union, Interreg program of the European Union. And PHIVE stands for Promoting Heritage in Virtual Environments. And we're a collaboration with partners in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Iceland, but we're also working closely with our friends in Barbados in a range of different projects and opportunities. So very much we're looking at how we can use some of the exciting emerging and new technologies to make it easier to communicate heritage. So we've been doing digitization, digital reconstruction. Last week's session, the previous session 2 weeks ago was focused upon digital reconstructions, and so we talked a lot about that, and we were pleased to have Jackie Aitken joining us for that session. But here we're kind of moving on, and we're wanting to talk a lot. We want to talk about storytelling and narratives. Really, because that is a really powerful way. It is a really powerful way of engaging people with a subject in ways that means that they can learn and that they can participate and that they can contribute. And we're calling this session immersive storytelling, and that kind of covers both digital and non-digital. So the point being that through storytelling, we can really get into a topic, and we can do it in a situation where we're immersed in the physical environment, but also with virtual reality now, we can immerse ourselves in environments using digital technologies. And this has one advantage. The digital immersion has the big advantage that we can look at things, or we can immerse ourselves in things that don't currently exist. So we can immerse ourselves in the past, or immerse ourselves in imagined futures or potential futures. And so that's one of the reasons why we're interested in looking at things like virtual reality and augmented reality as ways of promoting engagement with heritage. But that's just a little bit of background, and I'm very much looking forward to the next thing that is on the agenda here, which is that Kay Hall and Michelle Hinkson Cox are going to talk about some of your experience in storytelling and immersive storytelling. So I'll just hand over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am Kay Hall from the Barbados Museum Historical Society.
And I'm Michelle Hinkson Cox from Barbados Community College and REMA Artistic Consultants and Theatre Services.
So we're going to talk today about a program which the museum has been working with the college to sort of introduce young people to concepts of heritage and also to use applied theatre arts as a tool for community historical education, but generally for education with regard to history and heritage in general. Ian, you can go on to the first slide.
The second slide.
Oh, yes. So this is just a little quote that we sort of use it as a guide, a highlight, a watchword. From Landry, I find it useful to interpret processes of meaning making, especially as it relates to memory and remembered performances, as embodied action. So basically, yes, we want to remember. Yes, it is important and critical to remember. It is easier and it is more meaningful if you remember by doing. Next slide, please. Keep reaching forward for the keyboard. So just a little bit of context. There are a number of different applied theatre practices, but the ones which we found most relevant to what we are doing is obviously theatre in education, popular theatre, where we sort of popularize it and connect it back with what's happening now, theatre for development, community-based theatre, museum theatre, and reminiscence theatre, which are all kind of self-explanatory, we think. But if anyone needs a further explanation on that, they can always put questions in the chat and we can explain any of them in detail. But basically, we use combinations of all of these different types of theatre in order to get our message across. Next slide, please. One of the other cornerstones of our practice is what we call the community of practice. This is based on Lavin Wegner and was developed primarily by Natalie McGuire-Batson, and a teensy bit of help from myself. But this is what we are basing the foundation of the way how our museum works nowadays to make it more relevant, more meaningful, more useful to the community in which we find ourselves. This is based on the precepts of the social responsibility of museums, which we very much firmly believe in. But the idea is that we involve the community at every stage of our curatorial and programming practice, which creates actually a really wonderful feedback loop because we provide them with lots of heritage education and they work with us to let us know what is important, what is the part of heritage that they most want to remember, which they most want to preserve, so there's this wonderful continuing ongoing conversation as we explore our heritage together, which is what we think is the way it should be with museums going forward today. Next slide, please. So this is just a little kind of a scattergram which sort of shows the way how we expect the different areas of our practice to work with regard to the community of curatorial practice. So what we consider to be our watchwords, how the content is integrated with our methodology, with our research. We're aiming to be sustainable, but basically how all these things work together. We work with people across the diaspora, we work with people in our immediate community, but at every stage of what we do, where we develop our curatorial practice, we involve all of the different members of different parts of our community because we want it to be as inclusive a project as possible. Next slide, please. So let's talk about objectives. When we first started this theatre arts program, our research models, our methodologies were not as concretized as they are now. It's been sort of a work in progress, a developmental project. So we have some much simpler targets when we started this community theater project. We knew that audiences were becoming a bit more cosmopolitan, a bit more demanding. We know that you can't just let people in the museum and they walk around and read posters and then they go home. That's no longer very satisfying. So we were trying to think of a more immersive experience for people coming into the museum. We also wanted to be able to meet them where they were. Lots of people lamented not being able to come into the museum during the day because they had jobs, they had school, whatever. But you know, you all could do some stuff on the weekend, you all can do some stuff in the evenings. We'd be more willing to that. And then the third thing that happened was that we converted one of our spaces into a multifunction theater, which before COVID seated just over 300 people, and with COVID protocols in place now, still seats about 100 persons. So we wanted to be able to do that. And also one of the ongoing mandates of the Barbados Museum is that we want to involve our youth at every part of this, our operations, because we understand that they are the ones to whom we will be passing the mantle in terms of preserving our history, heritage, and culture. So we wanted to be able to educate young people. We wanted to use the theater. We wanted to satisfy the audiences with their after hours demands. We had quite a list of deliverables and objectives, as you can see from what we've got on screen. But first, but these were all kind of disparate, but we thought that a theater project might be useful to that. So enter, next slide, please, Ian, something we called,
it's more like explanation of applied theater.
Yes, well, I'm jumping ahead, yes. And obviously, just for some context, then I jumped ahead slides because I forgot the order. Applied theater is basically, instead of just, you put it there on stage and people are looking, it's supposed to educate, it's supposed to be inclusive, it's supposed to involve the audience, and it is supposed to be a growth experience for everyone involved. But the idea is that it allows you to examine, it allows you to analyze. It's a very interactive form of theater.
And in the case of what we're doing with the theater project at the museum, our applied theater kind of context, it hinges very strongly, as Kay would have said before, on museum theater as well as reminiscence and intergenerational theater. So one of the things that we do is that whatever topic we're looking at for a particular performance, we encourage the students as the first step in their process to talk to their elders, speak to the other people in their family, older people in their family, in their communities, to get those stories coming from their immediate family or family circle. I do the same thing as a playwright. I speak to my elders, I speak to the larger community. We do a lot of oral history research to get information that then is added to the textual research that we have from the museum as well. So the applied theater for us is not just in context to the performative aspect of it, but even in terms of the process, we are starting from a place where we're encouraging the students to be involved in the creation of the piece, to be involved in the research elements of the piece, and to do their own work as well, because that then is fulfilling that kind of community building mandate and that memory building mandate that we also have in the project.
Next slide, please, Ian. Right. And of course, there's also the element of Caribbean history. Caribbean history, as we're all aware, has largely, until the current century, been written from what would have been the former colonial centers, and tended to be somewhat Eurocentric in its perspective, which tended to skip over the key elements of some of our local perspectives and local stories. So one of the things we're doing is giving our people an opportunity to retell sometimes familiar stories of heritage, but from the point of view of the people who were not in the center, but who lived through that history. And it's brought us some quite interesting stories as well, as you will see later. Next slide, please. And last but not least, the concept of constructivist or constructive learning. One of our foundational educational principles in all that we do in the museum is the idea that the student is involved in the process of making meaning and in making understanding and in learning. It's not a passive process, but it is an interactive process between student and teacher learn and explore together. And this fits really, really almost like if it were made for it, really, with the model of applied theatre learning, and also with our concept of community co-creation and community of practice. Next slide, please. So, first and foremost, we're giving voice to a silenced history. This trio quote is something, another one of our sort of our guiding principles, our guiding quotes. But the idea, this project was born of the idea that there are a number of silences or spaces in the retelling of history, and it is up to us, the latter generations, to help engage and explore and understand and research and fill those gaps and fill those silences, so that a more comprehensive and more complete history can be told. Next slide, please. So, silences enter the process of historical production at 4 places. Making the sources, that's basically where it's conceptualized. The making of archives, that's where the information is stored. The moment of retrieval, which is when we make our narratives, and of course, the actual making of history. The idea here is that we are doing a little bit more, we're locating additional sources, we are creating our own archives, and we are, of course, creating narratives from our own perspective. All of this as a part of creating or expanding history as we know it. Next slide, please. So, basically, because of its deconstruction and constructivist, how should I put it? Elements, methodology, yes, thank you, Michelle. Applied theatre is particularly effective as a way of analyzing and deconstructing history if you use it as a lens through which history can be viewed. Students, for example, can be invited to ad-lib or riff or whatever, and basically take the place of different characters in history and literally act out how they felt, how they thought that person would feel. It allows them to sort of really work through when they think about putting themselves in the shoes of the people who experience the history, and basically it gives them a much better idea of how history is formed and how different perspectives can affect the way in which history is related. So it allows us to both deconstruct and decolonialize some of the fairly common themes that you see in ordinary Western interpretations of history. If you could please play the video, Ian. If you right click and preview, Ian, you'll probably get the play button. Oops. Ian, if you right click on the video and then choose preview, it gives you a preview with a play button. There we go.
Shackled arms. To ankle, chained from limb to limb, they're alarmed and they're strangled by the ear so thin. Stuck with no space in this dungeon they're in, fear on their face, pray the gods be with them. In the belly of this ship, moving farther from the shore, trapped by a 4-foot roof and a wooden locked door, they can't be sure. They're confused and asking what they take us for. They can't move and it feels like your life no longer yours. He's scared his brother close his eyes. He go to sleep and he can't wake him. And his soul wanna fight. He thinking I can't let them break it. The only escape is to jump overboard. He wanna take it. And it's either home or heaven. Either way he pray he make it.
So this video is actually one of our students, Ayele. Ayele created this piece completely by himself. A little bit of background, our museum is actually a former military prison. So we in fact have a cell which has been left untouched so people can see what the cells were like. So Ayele staged his performance inside the disused cell, which he pretended was the belly of a ship. But what he has done is he has deconstructed the process of forced migration from the West African subcontinent to the Caribbean as an enslaved person. And this is a very empowering experience. And this is just sort of a sort of a little very brief sketch that gives you an idea of just how useful applied theater can be in terms of deconstructing and decolonizing the stories that we've always been told. Next slide, please. So why applied theater? There are lots of different things you can do through applied theater, so we've discovered. So you can perform dramatic interventions such as historical reenactment. It goes well beyond the classroom experience, so it's not just you go in the classroom and you're given facts and figures. You get to really explore the theater. And basically, for a museum, when we traditional audiences, we have a greater audience through which we can do education, through which we can communicate our heritage, through which we can encourage people to safeguard, to accept, to understand, and to keep that heritage. So just play this next clip for me, Ethan.
Listen, this is my first Torchlight tour and it was amazing. I really enjoyed it. Of course I was with the Kansas men all the way, because Kansas just sweeter, but I really enjoyed it. It's love to see how the poems and the stories were adapted and how they were written to the play. The BCC crew never failed to represent and never failed to bring it. I am a little bit biased, but they never failed to bring it and they brought it tonight. I really, really enjoyed it. It was very natural, it felt authentic. And it was a really good program. I think this should be continued by the Barbados Museum. And yes, it will continue by the Barbados Museum. So if you missed tonight, come out to Sunday. You have to come out to Sunday. You have to see it. It can be sweet. Hopefully it can do this again because it's going to be real, real sweet.
It's all gone a bit. It's gone a little bit quiet. I'm not sure what.
Here we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Our connection dropped right out.
Okay.
Yes. Right. So basically, we're just going to look at some of our experiences now with the use of theater productions. We're actually going to start with the one that really made us start to study this as a methodology that we wanted to proactively use in every part of our programming and our curatorial work going forward, which is the Windrush play from Eolat Museum. Just a little bit of background. These students went a little bit beyond what they would have been encouraged to do in the past. Ordinarily, they would have done the reflective exercises, but the play would have been written for them. In this particular instance, they workshopped the play themselves with some fantastic results. We're going to let you see a little bit of the play later on, but what we're really going to focus on is sort of their reflections on the experience. Ian, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rashenda Hayward, and I go to the Barbados Community College. And the Windrush, this process has been very informative for me. I didn't know what the Windrush was before I started this process, and I'm very happy and grateful that I could bring awareness to other people as well, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people who didn't know about the Windrush. It's important to me because not only is it a case of bringing awareness, but it's a part of Barbadian history, and I think it's important for everyone to know it. And I know that the effects are still like trickling down from like generations of families. So like I know there are families that have been separated and stuff. So I just think it's really important to know your past so that you can have a better future. I'm glad that it happened because now people are aware of the situation and it's not being like hidden anymore. So that's why it's important to me.
Hi, my name is Dylan Collymore. I'm 17 years old, and I am involved in the Windrush piece put together by the BCC Theatre Arts students. This piece is important to me because I don't want to say directly affected, but my family is kind of involved in that Windrush era. My great-grandparents went down during the Windrush era, and that led to me and my other family members being born in England. So for me, it's more of a case where I'm thinking, wow, this is so unfair, because that could have been my grandparents, that could have been my mom, that could have been me being sent back to a place that they don't really call home when they call England their home instead.
Hi, my name is Raina Garns, and this piece is important to me because as a young person, I think that it's my job to create a following in social matters, whether it be international or national. And I believe that Windrush has impacted my country because it's known as Little England. So I want them to understand that it not only affects people in England, it also affects their family back here as well.
So my name is Tamina White, and I'm from here in Barbados. And for me, the Windrush.
And next slide, please. So basically, it's just to give you an idea of how rewarding the experience has been for students working with these projects. Ian, you can go on to the next slide. Right. This is another one that we did. We looked at a project called Civilian Internment in Barbados. This is actually an exhibition that's been traveling around the world. And what we did when it came to Barbados is that we added some panels to the exhibition which were relevant to the history of Barbados and the Caribbean. And then we invited some students to have a look at the exhibition and provide us with some reflections on that.
On the same day.
Yes, it was a kind of a workshop experience. So they shared with us some fairly interesting memories with regard to this, as well as they workshopped a few pieces literally on the day. I had to beg them to stop workshopping and actually show us something because they were having so much fun just interacting with the material. But I'm hoping this video will play at the spot I asked it to play at, because I didn't want to play it from the beginning, but let's play it and see what happens.
Yes.
At the intern camp in Australia.
Yes, it is.
Soldier who now suffers of PTSD after escaping the war. Here we have Otto Eberhard. He is a store owner. He was a store owner. Now you will see their evolution at the
you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
You sure you don't want?
Yeah, I'm okay. Okay.
Okay, well, I just want to let you know you're not.
I said I'm okay. You understand?
What?
Out there. You see out there?
I've been up there, okay?
The things you do, did it make you do? I had to get away from it. That was a crowd.
Look, sit down. Look, I know that this is hard. I know that actually gets you. But you have to.
Ian, stop the video.
Get energy in another way. Look, I write.
Unfortunately, the volume is a little bit low, but basically the idea is that they're reflecting on the experience. They're pretending to be internees in the camp, and they're discussing some of the issues that they're facing as internees. It actually does get a bit louder as it goes on because they express their frustrations and so on, and they reflected on the experience with regard to how their situation compared with some of the people who were outside of the internment camp. It was a quite interesting piece, but unfortunately the volume was a little bit low. The camera was not as close as it would have been for the pieces that they did themselves. But basically the idea here is that they're allowed to look at history that they may not have felt was relevant to them from before and really look at it and see what happened. So basically, just a little bit of background, there were internment camps all over the colonies where civilian Germans were held during the war under suspicion of maybe spying or simply being unfriendlies. And the exhibition which has traveled has talked about the experience of internment in all of the different countries until it came to Barbados. When it arrived in Barbados, it had just one single panel for the entire Caribbean area. We added some panels. We did some research about what their experiences would have been in the Caribbean area. And also we looked at how they would have interacted with our populations here. So the students were both asked to consider how the internees living in the camps felt, as well as what would have been happening with both the local citizenry outside the camp, as well as persons who would have been observing, who were neither one. And we got two very interesting pieces. As a matter of fact, the second piece in this was actually kind of a conflation of culture, so to speak, because they spoke about the internment experience within the camp, but they put it in a sort of a local reggae kind of styling, which is actually quite entertaining as well as interesting. Next slide, please. So another project which we're doing is we're redeveloping our core galleries, and we have been inviting the citizens of Barbados, the entire country, to say what they want to see when we put our new galleries back. The current galleries are one for natural history of Barbados and one for Barbados is what we call our social history, but they both stop just beyond independence, which would have been about 50 years ago. So overdue for an update. And also we want people to be able to say what is important to them, what they want to see when they come to a museum in Barbados. This is just a sort of a graphic which sort of shows how we expect the museum to reflect Barbados. Move forward one for me, please. Move forward another slide for me. And basically people were invited to write us, share their videos, share their thoughts on what could be done. And then here is Ayele again. He's going to tell us what he thinks that the museum should be doing.
So in addition to all the galleries that the museum has, what I would like to also see in the museum is some more representation of folklore stories and folklore characters. Reason being is because I feel like the folklore stories for us as Barbadians explain a lot about our way of life, why we do certain things, how we move, how we interact, just through the stories, the fairy tales that we have. Also too, I feel like it would be very interesting to tell these stories to visitors who are coming to visit the museum.
Next slide, please. So basically, in fulfillment of these initiatives, we've been doing a number of things. So we've gone into really critical development of our Torchlight tour, which got all of this going. Torchlight started out very simply as just actors doing standalone oratorial spots around the museum, and then they developed into full-fledged performances which involved the audience and which really cast a light on some of our Barbadian stories and allowed us to explore them. Ian, you can play both clips one after the other before we discuss.
Millie gone to Brazil. Millie, why you see Millie at church in the time now? She sick. Millie gone to Brazil.
Mona, I hear I'm fine Millie body.
In a well?
Wait, she the living? No, she the dead.
Millie Gone to Brazil, that is a folk song. Besides being a story of domestic abuse that ends up with a murder of Millie, it speaks to a murder that happened at a point in time in Barbados when hundreds, if not thousands of Barbadians were migrating to Brazil to work as laborers building the railway in Brazil. So where are they going? Economic conditions in Barbados were extremely depressed.
Now people from the village talking about getting down to Brazil. Millie. And they're talking about how people make enough money to send home for them families. Millie. So I did just think
because of that economic situation, many Barbadians found ways of supplementing that income, and that was done through migration. So you could wake up in the morning and realize that your next door neighbor has gone. So it was easy to have the excuse for the disappearance of Millie by simply saying, well, she went to Brazil. When it comes to the Torchlight Tour, what we did was to use a bit of poetic license to describe the types of scenarios that might have taken place. Perhaps this was an ongoing case where she was repeatedly beaten until that particular point in time where the beating actually led to her actual death. And in order to cover up that death, she was literally thrown into a well in hopes that her body would never be found and that the excuse for her disappearance was hidden behind the migration story. So yes, we can make a lot of suppositions that.
So basically, as you can see from these two clips, the first clip, let's focus on that. That is actually some shot by a member of the audience. And we were able to retrieve the clip from them. But basically, the idea is that the audience is very much involved in the theater process. They're not innocent bystanders. You hear them singing the chorus of a very popular spiritual, a very popular folk song that is sung in Pentecostal churches across Barbados nearly every Sunday, but they're now linking it back to a historical experience and understanding a little bit more about where the song came from. You see them dancing with the actors, you see them filming, you see them singing the chorus even if they don't know the words of the verses. And in the second clip now, Millie Gone to Brazil is based on a very infamous murder about which people knew that it happened, but they didn't necessarily know the story behind it and how it was tied to our migration history and to a lot of different aspects of what might have been going. And it also allowed us to have a discussion around domestic abuse at a time when the Me Too movement was just getting started, and these things were something. So it's allowed us to do quite a few things in just one very simple activity. Next slide, please. Right. So last year we added a new element to our summer internship to our summer internships. We usually do a junior curator program, and we also have a number of single internships. But what we have done is that we made a space for 6 theater art students to intern for the entire summer and to spend that summer working on and interpreting stories based on the museum's collections. We started out with a fairly formless idea of how we wanted things to run, because we wanted to see what would happen if we didn't put the students in boxes. And it yielded some very, very interesting results. They went through the museum. The museum has quite a number of different galleries. We've got an African gallery. We've got a natural history gallery. We've got an art gallery, which privileges portraiture. So they had quite a few different experiences from which they could pull. And we got a wide range of different things. And the students, basically, they did the filming themselves, they did the development themselves, they did the pieces themselves. This piece we're going to share right now is one of my favorites. Ayele again. He was super talented, so he tended to stand out from the other students. I feel a bit guilty for not showing any of the others, but Ayele started too good to give up. So play the clip, please, Ian.
Check me here. You spending all your good money in the people hospital place? Got them pushing chemicals and toxins in your face? You think that taking all them chemicals for months at a time, all good or well, I could cure you sickness by 11 and have you healthy by 12. Check me here. I's the doctor you need to see. They don't call me no MD for my natural remedies, antidotes, poisons, charms, and teas. I got me a cure for all your sickness and disease. They say no black magic is straight from the land. We don't cast no blame on no old bear man. Yo, check me here. You think you safe with all them meds them doctors just push? I've settled many a stomach with my bellyache bush. I've cleared off the diabetes with my trumpetry tea. I've made high blood pressure sink like a rock in the sea. I've cured the incurable for a pretty, pretty price. I've seen demons and spirits running like mice. I can make your enemies fall, if that's what you please. But I only cooperate at a heavy, heavy fee. But should you regret using my remedies for your wicked deeds, don't blame me. 'Cause you must understand, we don't cast no blame on the old beer man.
So quite a few different things are topical and discussed in this piece, which is why we chose it. Running counter, or I should say running right alongside of traditional Western religions like Anglicanism, Catholicism, and so on. We have had a number of spiritual practices in Barbados, one of which is the practice of obeah, otherwise known as bush medicine, because there is also a medicinal aspect, a traditional medicine aspect, where basically it depended on the traditional knowledge of plants. But of course, there is also that fear that goes with someone who practices the arts. It would be sort of the equivalent of witchcraft, and maybe the Wiccan practice in the Western Hemisphere. It has similarities with voodoo and with other religions in South and Central America, but it is a combination of spiritual belief as well as traditional medicinal practice. We've had an ongoing project to sort of investigate this. I suppose we sort of call it colloquially our bush tea project, but the idea is to get people to understand where the practice has emerged from, its links to Africa, its parallels with Christianity in certain cases, and also the parallels with certain of the traditional medicinal drugs that we use, and with what we would call prepared medicines, which are done by pharmaceutical companies. So The idea is to destigmatize it to some extent, to understand it. And we did not, in fact, ask Ayele to do this piece. Ayele decided to explore this on his own. And what is interesting about this is that while there is an apothecary's case in the museum's Jubilee Gallery, and where there's some off discussion as you go through the galleries, he needed to do quite a bit more research outside of that in order to create this piece. So that's sort of a demonstration on what they can do when they're inspired to explore and understand our history. Next slide, please. All right, we're done. So questions, are we doing questions at the very end, or are we going to do questions now, Alan and Catherine?
We could take questions. I mean, I think we will take them at the end. It would be good to have a sort of dialogue between yourself and Mary. However, if people have questions, if there are any that are bursting to come out, then that would be fine too. So I don't have any questions just at the moment, but yeah, thank you very much for that intriguing and exciting journey through some of your practice, innovative as it was and is. And I think it would be good to Mary. Do you want to come in now? So this storytelling is dominated by island practice. So we've heard about Barbados, and now Mary's going to talk about some of her experiences from North Uist.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michelle and Kay, for an absolutely mind-blowing approach to learning. My question, which I will ask at the end, but the burning question is, how far does the model of learning that you've espoused, which is very much in accordance with my own kind of feeling about how children learn, how much do your how well prepared are your students to work in this way by the schools they come from? But if we keep that to the end, I might forget it by the end, because too often schools operate on a transmission model, that learning is transmitted from teacher to student. And my feeling is always that students make their own learning and meanings on the things they find relevant, the things that they're interested in. So I thought the theoretical basis of your enactment was very profound. Thank you for that. My offering here is much more homegrown and off the cuff. It's thanks to Alan and Ian and others from St Andrews that the link has been made with immersive technology for our remote island, which has poor connectivity in places. But over the years, we've engaged with our young folk on a series of very exciting projects. And we have told the children that they're actually university students already, in terms of the way that we work on heritage with them. We speak Gaelic up here. Mine isn't so good because my father had to migrate. He was one of 7 brothers, only 2 of whom remained on the island. One because he had TB, and the other because he had huge tragedies in his life, World War I. On the mainland, my father although qualified as a doctor and a ship's surgeon in World War One, he found it difficult to get a job on mainland Scotland because he was known as a tuchter, a wild Hebridean, very much mistrusted on the mainland, the more refined cultural, as they saw it, mainland. So he ended up working abroad for a lot of his life, but returning to a poor cotton mill town in Lancashire, where there were 6 Gaelic-speaking doctors. They formed a small unit, ostracised a bit by mainland Scotland, but happily working on the mainland. And I think that perhaps shows some of the difficulties we have coming from such a refined culture as the Gaelic culture in being classified in the way that we have been. The island's a bit like a lab because people who migrate tend to come back and bring their language and their values with them. And the Thai Ceilidh, or the Ceilidh House, was the whole source of entertainment before we had television. And these were informal gatherings where very complicated stories were told, adapted. The teller of the story told it in her or his own version. Songs were sung, fiddles were played. The entertainment was rich. And we're trying to capture in our society some of that richness from the elders and knowledge bearers who still can fulfill that tradition. I wonder if we can go to the clips now from Duncan McKinnon, who's actually 90 now. And I don't know, oh, there he is. I don't know if we've got the song he sings to start with, or which clip is this? All right.
Taramat manapi go trang marasavish, the loch with his lavok, talagus ost. Scudig an chaarstig, sniag tag, schlieg an tag, jachashar kevost. Because Hennagat Marava. Well, go you, Hanneke, Dag, Kashani, the Lochwood, the Lochnomatic.
Okay.
Can
stop that one there. That's just a snapshot of our wonderful language, the poetic expression of it. It's an Indo-European language, and it's spoken very beautifully. Duncan is a consummate storyteller and singer, and this is an example in English of the story that he told about when he was a boy of 12, and it's a premonition story about seeing something in the water. They had to ferry the stallion to the foals on his small island and let them swim behind a boat. And he'll tell the story in English now.
They were going to start jumping up and you know, anyway. So, but one day they took the stallion across, and it wasn't a very nice day. 1944 it was, I remember it very well. Of course, I'll tell you about how I saw the ghost of that tour.
Yes.
If it was a ghost, I don't know. But my father had a boat. He used to ferry people across. He used to take the meals across and deliver them and all this carry on. So there was somebody wanting to go to Eust. And we went across with a small boat we had, 16 or 17 footer boat with a sail, just straight across there to the. Then when they put this man ashore, turned away, and my father was working the oars, and he said to me, get the sail up and all this. Then I saw this horse swimming under the boat, a yellowish coloured horse. We had a horse like that ourselves when I was young, just yellowish coloured. And you could see his tail floating in the sea, and you could see his mane floating, and he swam. And I said to my father, look at the horse. And I said, what horse? And I said, look at the horse. I said, don't be stupid, get the sail up and don't be talking rubbish. And off we went home. And I don't know, perhaps a fortnight or something after that, or 3 weeks, I can't remember. This stallion came along, and it was a very nice day. But they said, well, after walking from Lochmaddy and all that, you would be very hot-blooded, then going to the cold. So there was a boat over there, and a rowing boat, and they went off with the stallion. Halfway across, he died. The people in the boat never said, they said he wasn't drowned, but he had perhaps had a heart attack. So this shepherd from PHIVE, Woody Pig, he was called, he made a song about that, how the stallion came. So, and well, to tell you a little bit, most of the boys from the school came down to see the stallion. You see, it was an event, getting a horse across and singing. And when we went down to the market, that was exactly like the horse that I saw, the same colour and same things, exactly like that. And anyway, I don't suppose people believe, I can still see it, in my mind, the horse swimming there. I was 14 years old then, or something, 12 or 14 years old.
So that's an example of one of Duncan's stories, and he's come into schools and told his stories. He's got so many, many stories, but he mentions there a shepherd from another island, Pabe, again very close to us, who composed a song. And it's illustrative of how close song, poetry, and storytelling are. And so if we could just have a wee bit of the song now, and Duncan singing the song in Gaelic.
Nad chwalus gyda fas chai Patrick gyda chwch, gwrmis y diwa tam a tuch salad yn chwch. Stws y fac y doiol sylwch fôr y tyn yr sal, stwhan am bocs y dwndach yn Africych bwr na car, stws iefyn i'r dochyd sy chwlen i'n ac, Poch het de granish en achtegin de va. Satina loch de matu kun bakker nog de geem. Schaun kun komme kar ut de schaun en arsje speer. Nedan ik jach van lastru trais en alem. Happe hoofd dat de zo'n slaaf gaf een straatje wat ik geef.
Thank you. Oh yes, that's the end of that clip. So the influence of story is a huge cultural resource for us, and story and song are woven into all the traditional working lives. The person who taught me to milk a cow would have songs for getting the milk to flow. And then if the cow was restless, calming her down, a kind of lullaby, milking song. And such a rich tradition on the island that the website that I took those clips from, which Gordon Wells runs and has used to capture all the oral history recordings we've made, is a very rich resource. And we're now working together with Gordon and Alan to look at new ways of using technology, not only to preserve the rich tradition, linked so closely to landscape, identity, place, but also in terms of getting the young children to reenact aspects of it. And I think we did a project where children from local schools adopted a local monument. This is a set of standing stones called Finn's People. Finn McCool was the great Irish hero, and this is just one of the stories taken from his life that the children of Carnish School reenacted. I think I should say the idea when Alan came up, we did it all as a piece of movement with children reading the stories bilingually in Gaelic and in English. But the day they came, you'll have to imagine them doing this within the standing stones. But they had to unlearn everything very quickly, Michelle, as a drama expert, and just pose for still photographs, because that was the only way we could think of doing it on that particular day. Would you like to play that clip now, showing
how the mighty Finn McCool got his two favourite hunting dogs? One day, a very long time ago, Finn was resting with his men after hunting when Gol MacMorna saw a boat approaching, even though he only had one eye. A tall man marched quickly up the hill towards them. The stranger, known as the young hero, explained to Finn that he lived on a nearby island and needed his help urgently to stop a huge giant stealing his babies the moment they were born. Only the mighty Finn would be able to outwit the giant. His wife was about to have their third child, and he didn't want to lose that child again. The young hero challenged Finn to follow him before he ate, drank, or slept, and quickly strode off down to the shore. Finn acts quickly and asks one of his followers to build a boat, another to be the tracker to follow the stranger, and the one who's best at stealing things, and the one who is the best climber, to come with him, and they go quickly to set sail. The boat builder cuts down 3 great trees and shows Finn the boat he has made in seconds. Finn is delighted with it. They soon arrived at the next island and were greeted by the young hero, who allowed Finn to eat and drink before he showed him his new baby son lying next to his bed. He asked Finn and his men to keep watch all night for the giant, but can Finn keep awake? The split second that Finn's eyes began to close, the giant pounced and he stole the baby away. Finn jerked himself awake. The stranger wakes up and is furious with Finn. He talks to the one who is a good tracker, and sniffing the air, he follows the trail of the giant until he finds him lying asleep with the baby. 2 young girls are playing shinty with a silver ball, and 2 puppies are sleeping by their mother. So the climber is sent to attach a rope to the wall of the giant's castle, and up he goes, the thief following him. Between them, they rescued all 3 of the young hero's children, even taking the baby from the hollow of the giant's hand, and brought away everything that was in the giant's chamber, including his bedclothes and the mother dog and her puppies. The young hero was delighted and offered Finn whatever he wanted. Finn asked if he could take the puppies with their mother away with him as his reward. The giant appears on the horizon, and Finn has to think quickly. Throw one of the puppies into the water, he commands. The moment he did this, the mother dog also jumped into the water to save the pup and dragged it to dry land, taking it back to the young hero. Meanwhile, one of Finn's archers shot the giant in a secret place only Finn knew about, the palm of his hand, and giving a mighty roar, he plunged like a mountain falling into the sea and was gone. Finn and his merry men celebrated with a mighty feast at the Hazel Glen Hall of the young hero, and they stayed there for a year and a day until the puppies were grown. Finn named his puppy Bran, and the young hero kept the other, naming it Scolán, meaning grey dog.
And that's the end. Thank you, Ian. That's the end of my presentation. I think we made that some 5 or 6 years ago, and some of those children still gather with us if we're going to make a film. And so working with them from quite an early age has, in our junior branch of our historical society, has been really important. And the model we use with them for scaffolding the learning is very similar to the model explained in more detail by Kay and Michelle, allowing the children to work on the story, to retell it in their own words. It was actually one of the teachers reading the narrative on that day, because we had to change everything around so much. But I think it still shows the involvement of and delight of the children, their engagement. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. It was great to hear what you were saying. And Gordon, you were wanting to do a plug, I think, for Duncan's and other stories. You put something in the chat. Do you want to say a couple of words to that?
I didn't say it for you, Gordon, because I thought you might be able to say it better yourself.
Well, thank you. The plug is in the chat, really. But all I was really saying was thank you for plugging that particular piece, and to also express appreciation for the fact that, you know, the way that we've worked together collaboratively over such a long period of time now. So I don't really have anything particularly prepared to say. I might just put in a couple of more links in the chat, because perhaps from the digital point of view there might be a couple more interesting things to say, particularly in relation to the bilingualism, which you've already referred to. And one point I would make would be that the digital environment, distancing in some ways though, is also quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Empowering in other senses from a language point of view, in terms of enabling access across languages. And what I'll do is I'll put in another couple of links from stories that are on that page, which I've already linked to, the storytelling page on the Island Voices site, where a well-known and well-loved storyteller, not Duncan this time, but Norman MacLean, who's sadly no longer with us, recited to you, you'll remember it well, Mary, a couple of well-known stories from the US tradition in Gaelic. We had them on YouTube in Gaelic and pretty much unmediated for quite a long time. We have augmented them in various ways since they were first recorded. Firstly, by providing a bare transcript, and secondly, what I've done today, this very morning, in fact, now that I learned that this event was happening, was that I've put subtitles on both of those two short stories. The subtitles are on YouTube, so you have to click on the closed captions button, and they'll take you to a Gaelic subtitling, so it's same language subtitling, but this is bringing, I've gone a long way around it, but the point which I'm coming to is that because of the technical supports that are now available, that Gaelic story is now accessible, if you like, to speakers of multiple languages simply by going to the settings wheel and then clicking on auto translate, and then you get a long list of different languages, including English, into which you can translate the Gaelic subtitles. So what I'll do is I'll just put those links there in the chat, and people can have a look at them in their own time if they want to get an idea of some of the traditional tales, some of the other traditional tales which are told, have been told around Jewish for generations.
Thanks, Gordon.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Gordon.
I have to say that it was Gordon who originally inspired the recordings of these. We were already working with the children in schools, and it was a very happy coincidence to meet up with Gordon and then with Alan. And there's a kind of synergy now, which has helped us as a very small voluntary society who have to get funding for each project ourselves with no paid staff as such, to try to promote the language, the place, and the special cultural values and identity through story.
Thank you. And I think that there's a number of clips that are associated with the Windrush generation that are online, and some also for the stories that we did, Mary. So I don't know, maybe Ian or Catherine could pop some of those into the chat as well. So that would be good. There were some questions. Actually, Catherine asked a question, which was, how prepared are students to work within theatre by schools? Often
that was Mary's question from earlier. I wrote it down so she remembered.
All right, okay. So we've had that question.
No, there hasn't been an answer.
Oh, okay, good.
Sorry,
yeah,
Alan. We have a school system, as Kay was alluding to in the presentation, that is still, very much built on a colonial model. And so a lot of the times you have students coming into the college that are accustomed to learning by regurgitation rather than the constructivist approach that we are trying to work with. So we normally have to start by deconstructing their own ideas of what it is to learn. And one of the things that I always tell them is that they have to take responsibility for their own educational experiences. So for instance, since we watched the clip on Millie Gone to Brazil, one of the things that we would have done in preparing that piece is we present them with the story as we know it. This is the song. This is the history that is told. What are, and I think you had one of the clips about the gaps in history. What are the gaps in this story? Where do you find the question marks? What are the things that are not spoken about, not answered, and how can we then address those things? So we begin by kind of trying to encourage a culture of questioning, because that is something that a lot of students do not have when they come to the college. They're accustomed to the teacher saying, this is what it is, and they accept that and they move with it. And I'm saying to them, no, challenge me as the teacher as well, challenge me as the writer, because then we find those gaps and we're able to then talk about them. What I usually do though, when we find those gaps, because of course we're still dealing with historical or heritage-based stories, is that I would always then take those gaps that we find, back to the museum, to either Kay or the deputy director, Kevin Farmer, and say, okay, is this plausible? Because we don't want to go to the other extreme of taking so much creative license that we present something that is completely far removed from the truth. But we do want to encourage the students and the audience as well to begin to look at those gaps and to think about the different things that we have not spoken about in our history. And we see that especially in the productions that we would have done on bush medicine. We saw a lot of it in that production, especially because there is so much stigma associated with that. And we saw it, and there was another one, John Belly Mama. We did one that was based on a collection of folk songs. And again, just being able to discuss the possibilities that come out of the different folk songs. So we tend to start from that kind of centering the idea of questioning before we even launch into the work. And it's not just the BCC students. We would have worked with interns from Martinique or Guadeloupe? Martinique. Right, interns from Martinique who were at the museum last year. And despite the slight language barrier, because they were learning English and our French is horrible. So despite the language barrier, what we saw happening was that they were able to embrace the methodology. Mm-hmm. And I'm really sorry that the clip did not play clearly, because the young lady who started speaking at the beginning of that internment clip was actually one of the Martinican students. And she was able to use her understanding of English and the situations to then explain to us what we were going to see in the presentation by the others. So it's a methodology that is easily transferable, not just for theater students, but for students in general. It is one that we're encouraging because we do invite, for instance, different school groups to come to, especially the Torchlight performances. And one of the things that we do when they come is that, we encourage them to participate, to ask questions. We had one particular year where there were some young children and they were asking so many questions that the grandmother figure in that story kind of had to step up as though she was going to discipline them because the questions were becoming overbearing at one point. So we encourage that kind of participation and sharing. Mm-hmm. There are times when the actors might ask questions of the audience, encourage the audience to come. We've had, as we say in Barbados, big hardback old people coming in and playing ring games as a part of the performance. So that, I think the inclusivity, that sense of being involved in the action as well, call and response that we use, those techniques, they all encourage that kind of thinking and that involvement in re-narrating our history, if you can put it that way.
A twofold purpose of both encouraging engagement and then directing how they engage with the material. So although there isn't a lot of preparation involved at the audience level, or even, for example, last summer, remember I mentioned we had 2 internship programs running parallel, our junior curator program and our theater arts practicum for the theater arts students. And what we did is we deliberately merged the classes on the days of the week that the theater arts interns were there, and we set them the same assignments. And while the acting from the BCC students would have been a little more polished because they would have been in the program at least a year practicing their craft, the other students who would have come from fine arts, from history, from geography, from biology, from wherever, they very quickly grasped the concepts. And once they got over their initial shyness, they sort of participated with a fair bit of gusto. Marie said something a little while ago about not necessarily having the technology to support this, but the 3 videos that we saw from Ayele, for example, the kids used their cell phones to shoot that. So basically one kid performing and the other kids acting. We didn't professionally shoot any of those videos with the exception of the Windrush one, which you guys did for us, and also the clip where the deputy director would have been interviewed about John Belly Mama. That was done by the Government Information Service in Barbados when they sort of passed through and asked to do an interview, but everything else is amateur video shot with cell phones and similar.
Thank you.
That's fascinating. Thank you very much for that. So just seeing if you have any more questions that we'd like to. I noticed that we've got some more clips gone up. Scully says to everyone, he normally takes more of a leading role in these seminars, but is suffering a little from COVID. But fortunately, we can still meet online. So inspiring presentations. Thank you all. He has to leave for another event, but we'll watch the rest in the recording. Okay, so thank you very much for that. Ishbel Duncan also says thanks for the talks. We found them all to be very interesting. And Judith Miller, who had asked for earlier on, said, you know, how positive she found it to see young people actively engaging in heritage, as it's so often seen as an older person's hobby. So I suppose that with engaging these young people in theatre and in the heritage, do you find that helps connect with a younger audiences with heritage? Or
yeah, absolutely. You know, I think a part of why I wanted to start this project in 2014 was because there was a very clear absence of understanding of our history and our heritage. And funny enough, I became interested in history and heritage working at the London National Trust when I was in England, and seeing how they were using the arts to bring the schools, the community schools, into the space and engage with the artifacts in the space. I wanted to do the same thing with theater. And what we're seeing is essentially that engagement makes a difference, you know? There are students who didn't know, for instance, that we have a pirating history in Barbados. And it's one of the more fun stories that we've had to tell, really fun production. But they didn't know about the pirating history. And we had a whole discussion about that. We had discussions about our indigenous, it's not really indigenous, but one of our martial arts, stick licking. Yes. Right? And coming out of that conversation with them at the beginning of the process, they did their research and found out that their grandparents were masters at stick licking, which they never knew. So it really has not only taught them about the history of our culture, but they've been learning about their own family histories through the process, which I think is really important for us as a people. And especially now as we're you know, a new republic. So we need to be able to have these stories helping us to shape our identity as we're moving forward.
And one of the things too, which I found particularly uplifting, this is something that was said to me, which I wish I'd had the good common sense to record at the time. But basically, I've had students from the theatre arts program come back to me and say, you know, we learn all these modern theatre techniques, but this engagement with history, practice the traditional techniques of theatre, the call and response, and a lot of different things we would not have learned otherwise, because they fit in with this type of storytelling. And going forward in our practice, this is something that we want to retain. Yes, it's all wonderful to be able to spout theory and so on with regard to how theatre should be practiced, but it's also great to be able to intersperse that with the learning of traditional theatre techniques, which have been passed down through generations. So that was actually a fairly cool sort of side positive as well.
Yeah, we're learning about our oral traditions more. And I think a part of the challenge that I've noticed is that because we are a very oral community, we've lost a lot of the stories along the way. But by bringing the theatrical back into it, what's happening is because we're writing the stories, we're still maintaining the orality, but the stories are now written, which means that you have an actual, you know, hard copy archive that you can say, okay, these are our stories. And hopefully that means that they will come back into our mainstream, hopefully.
We sort of have a channel. Well, I have a channel where I've been sort of collating the different clips we found of the BCC performances from wherever they are. Once it is a video that I can upload myself to YouTube from Facebook, or I can link to somebody else's YouTube or whatever. So they're all in one place, and I put it in the chat. But basically, we've got a sort of a playlist that we've created of all the different performances we've been able to find of the BCC students. while working with this project.
That's great. I'm looking at that just now, and I'm actually thinking that, you know, in the process of this this seminar, we've collected together quite a collection of links and of heritage, and I think that one thing that would be, I think we should make sure that we save the chat, so that I think that it's in the Facebook page we can put into the comments all of the links. So I think it would just be nice to have the Island Voices and the Barbados Community College and the North US things all together in one place, and kind of reflect some of the sharing that's going on in this, and so we can then share that with our respective Facebook audiences.
Alan, I'm going to have to leave because Peter has a hospital appointment in Benbecula. So I'm very sorry to leave before the very end. But I need to be a chauffeur now. So.
Well, thank you so much for your participation. And we're scheduled to finish at in about 10 seconds time. So your timing is immaculate. Mary, as ever. But
Bye, Mary.
No, I'm on US time. Lovely to see you, Kay and Michelle.
Nice to see you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
I think we've got another meeting scheduled sometime, but I can't remember when.
Friday.
So we'll be in touch. Bye.
Bye.
Just take the opportunity just to call out and see if anybody has a last comment they would like to make, either or by video or in the chat.
Just to say thank you, Gordon. I completely agree with you on the digital aspect of it. Our challenge here continues to be funding, and so we always kind of struggle with our documentation because we don't have the funding for it. So that's one of the areas that we're now trying to get into, because we can use the cell phones, but we also want to be able to get, properly documented work as well.
And further to what Michelle has just said, like one of the videos that you will see in that playlist is something called Tales in the Forest. And that really shows you what the difference between funding and not funding. Yes. It's incredible, really. That was actually shot in the museum's North Garden, and you wouldn't believe that it was just a simple play put on in the garden, but the possibility to have a professional camera crew with professional sound and professional lighting made such a huge difference. It was incredible. So.
Sure, yeah, I take those points entirely. In a sense, it's a different kind of viewing experience that you expect when you're looking at something which is professionally made and when you're looking at something which is hand knitted, if you like. And all I'm saying is let's not leave the hand knitted stuff to one side, because video making can become very, very sexy very, very quickly. And you don't necessarily want to leave behind the origination from the people themselves, if you like, which is where the cell phones come in. And it's a different kind of viewing experience, but it's also very authentic and real in a way which the polished video sometimes loses in, I think. But anyway, the broader point was just your point about orality and voice, and how video means that we are not tied to the written word in order to preserve and curate, as it were. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gordon. So yeah, thank you for everybody for participating in this. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure that everybody else has. As Taja says, thank you for a very interesting and inspiring webinar. As a folklorist and a teacher, I really enjoyed the presentations. regards from Finland. So we've spread to Finland. So we've got Finland, we've got Iceland, we've got the Western Isles, we've got Barbados. A nice spread of. And you know, I would say to any funder who might be listening that's the sort of thing that you really should be funding. And I've got a few ideas about that, Kay. So maybe we could have a conversation in the next week or next couple of weeks about possible funding.
That would be terrific.
Opportunities. Okay, so thank you, and we'll just wind up the seminar. So you know, feel free at this point in time to leave. I mean, I'm going to hang around here if you want to carry on chatting, but I think we'll switch off the Facebook feed fairly soon. Yeah, thanks for everyone's participation. And thanks a lot, particularly, I have to say thank you to Catherine and Cassidy for putting it together, and also thank you to George Alvarez for putting together the adverts and the circulation and doing all of the behind the scenes work to get this going. And of course, thank you to Ian Oliver for running the show as it was going. So that's a lot of thanks.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you from us as well.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.